If so much has been said about how you get love relationship work, but still so many people struggle, it is attributable to one of two things: unpreparedness or the unwillingness to learn. Communication is to love relationship what blood is to the body. Once your communication isn't right, every other thing fails. Now you see why the focus of this conversation is communication. I mean, productive communication. Listen, your boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse may be cute. Unfortunately, bad communication makes the hottest relationship lukewarm. My friend, we are about to provide the basic tools which hopefully turn your love relationship into something like a volcanic eruption. Ladies and gentlemen, I am about to receive live from London Coach BK, who will be responding to some important questions, especially those that are related to communication, which is foundational to all smooth functioning love relationships. Join me now in welcoming Coach BK from London. Coach BK, thank you for coming to take our questions.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
How do you explain there's so many miserable love relationships out there? Could communication be part, if not the major source of the problem, sir?
So that's an all-encompassing question, Divine. Let's start by defining the terms. So I see a relationship as an enterprise between two or more entities. So two or more people or components come together to interact, exchange energies, and to build synergy. What is the role of communication in this particular scenario? Now, if you're exchanging energies to build synergies, then there must be a defined and a desirable outcome. And this outcome needs to be agreed upon by the communicating parties. So it begs the question, what is the medium through which, and what is the term of engagement through which we come to this end? Seekers, in an engagement, clearly you're looking for an outcome. It's not always clear to interacting parties what it is they're looking for. They may have an idea, but they do not always know with clarity and absolute certainty what it is they want, nor do they know how they will get there. So it's a bit like having a map of the territory, but not confusing the map for the territory, because there will be blind spots and there will be stumbling blocks. There will be things that the entities or the parties involved will learn by virtue of the fact that they are undertaking that journey together. And so communication, so to speak, would be the building block. It is the communication that will bring them to a place and a headspace where they get to understand what it is they actually got into. It is communication that is going to help two parties actually get to know if at all they should be in this enterprise. Otherwise, there will be misunderstandings, which usually would be the source and the main source of conflict. So there are two main parts to every relationship. On the one hand, there is communication, which is the building block. And on the other hand, there is the prerequisite for that for that relationship, so to speak, which is love. So love is the foundation upon which that relationship will be built. It is love that will allow two people to be patient with each other, to be respectful of each other, to engage, to interact, embrace each other, exchange these energies and build synergies, agree on the direction of motion, the momentum, and where they take it. I would like to proceed and say communication has got multiple facets. It has got several components. So we have got the thought or thinking, which is the vocabulary of the mind. And we have got feelings, which are the vocabulary of the body. Now the thoughts eventually get translated into feelings, and these feelings are transcribed into words. And this is where we have a bit of a challenge, because it's not everything that we are thinking about that we can articulate, capture in words, and express. And it's not everything that we express that captures our intent. So sometimes we walk past and talk past each other, and we fail to communicate, because I may mean to say one thing, and I may articulate that thing that I thought I was talking about or expressing, but you would hear something completely different because you have a different set of filters. So I would say communication is the bread and butter of every relationship. It is the main fabric upon which relationships are built, the building blocks, so to speak. And love in and of itself is the foundation.
BK, you speak so clinical. I mean, what a clinical analysis of communication and love relationship. You sound like a professor in this subject. When people communicate poorly, remember, we are not talking about strangers. We're not talking about roommates. We're talking about those who from the outset profess to be so much in love, they could stand and gaze into each other's eyes in rainstorm, thunderstorm for hours. We're talking about those who started so well, and soon it gravitates into a situation that looks more like a courtroom, a defense lawyer and a prosecutor. So what happens here, BK? Is it the unwillingness to learn, or these are people who rushed into a relationship unprepared on how to handle tough situations?
So that's another pivotal question, Divine. It beggars belief. Are we ever really prepared for anything that we indulge and or engage in? Today you are a fine journalist. I'm sure you would agree with me that the journey was not always smooth. But the day you thought you wanted to become a journalist, you engaged. Now you were steadfast, you were determined, you threw everything in there, including the kitchen sink. You were going to give it your all. Sure, there were days you thought of giving up, throwing in the towel. Look at our careers. You start a career, but something you're really passionate about. But then you realize that you have to invest. Sleepless nights. You're tested and tried. You have to go through the furnace. Look at childbirth. You have to wait 9 months to eventually have that baby. And when the baby comes, it's all about sleepless nights. But when you think about the whole concept of having a baby, it is so nice and dandy. It is almost romantic until you plunge in, until you start that journey. Even a hobby, I play the guitar. As you can see, I've got one parked right behind me. See, you fall in love with this instrument, but then the day you pick it up, you realize the music doesn't just play itself. The music wants to come through you. That is true. But you're going to have to prepare a terrain. You're going to have to go through the drill to allow that music to express itself through you, to come through your soul. I remember the very first chord that I learned how to play, G. See, because with the guitar, there are a couple of chords, G, C, D, and about 4 chords with which you could play literally any song on the planet. But you would hit those chords and nothing would happen. It takes practice. It comes with pain. You feel your fingertips screaming for help until you get to that place where you can actually make music. And then the satisfaction, the satiation, the fulfillment is just out of this planet. So you notice there is a learning curve. And with everything that is worthwhile, there's going to be that learning curve, that period of getting to understand what exactly it takes. So from a dream, you have to translate it into reality. When rubber meets the road, that's when you get to understand what it takes to come to that place, you see, because if it were that easy, everyone would be a medical doctor, everyone would be a journalist, everyone would be an astrophysics, everyone would be an astronaut, everyone would be a pilot. It looks amazing, it looks great, it looks nice and dandy on paper, but it takes a strong resolve. It takes dedication, it takes determination, it takes patience, it takes sleepless nights to get to that place, to move from point A to point B. It takes consistency, it takes steadfastness, it takes temerity, it takes who you are, it takes everything in you. You have to give it your all, and it takes passion, it takes an interest, it takes selflessness to get to that place. Now, if this is true for every other aspect of life and every other thing that we engage in, why should it be any different for relationships? So we get into the relationship with this twisted idea in our heads that it will be a bed of roses. And when it starts, it's exactly that, because we fall in love, and falling in love means you like what you see and you love what you've interacted with so far. Two people who come and they engage around the areas that they agree. And at the beginning, that's what the relationship is all about. And when they lockstep at that level, they activate and release endorphins in each other. They are patient, they live for one another. You have the one who would roll themselves out on the floor like a carpet for the other one to walk all over them. And that is that thing, the love, which is the foundation. It is the thing that brings with it patience. It is the thing that makes one person listen to the other for understanding. It is the thing that makes one sacrifice themselves for the other. You find yourself in a place and a headspace where all that matters to you is how and to what extent you meet and greet the needs of the other, and sometimes their wants, whether it serves the relationship or not. But then no sooner do you go through this phase, and then do you realize there are other aspects of that relationship that need to be managed. There is where you're going with your life, and there is where I am going with my life. And the question is, did we factor that in? Then there are your values and there are my values. Did we take time out to see how and to what extent our values coalesce and overlap? Did we understand from the get-go that we were going to meet these stumbling blocks, and were we ready to learn, to accept that these stumbling blocks, when they showed up, were going to have to be stepping stones for us to get to the place where we needed to go? Did we realize that relationships are not really just about you and I laughing and having a good time when times are great, but it's about supporting each other when times are hard? And it's about respecting our differences and growing from those differences.
You talk about all these things that need to be conjugated for people in love relationship to move from point 1 to point 2. BK, you think they don't know? You think you're telling people anything new they don't know? And if they know, what stops them? What's the stumbling block? Or what are the stumbling blocks between point 1 and point 2? What's stopping them from moving from point 1 and point 2? All these things you say, or the litany of things you say, it takes. I can tell you a lot of people know them. We're not telling anybody anything new here. BK, what's the stumbling block? What's stopping people from becoming what, when they started, they had hoped to be?
So, Divine, there are a number of things. We all have a background, and because of our background, we have certain reflexes, we come with a certain conditioning. It's a bit like, or it's akin to the medical doctor who says, be careful, those cigarettes will kill you. And on their lunch break, they go out, they huff and they puff a whole pack or half a pack of cigarettes. Is it because they don't know that cigarettes are dangerous? No. But these cigarettes have found meaning in the core fabric of their being. So they smoke when they are stressed. And in some way, shape, or form, the cigarettes give them release. And they feel relieved. Now, it doesn't matter that it is a bit of a placebo effect. I like to use the example of smoking because usually when you're stressed, the very first thing that anyone would say to you is breathe. Breathe in, breathe out, be present. Fill your lungs with air, then release that air slowly and deliberately, and you will calm down. Notice that's exactly what happens when you smoke. So you are breathing. You breathe deliberately so, and that brings with it certain amount of relief. And it is that relief that brings you back in a state of peace. You find your still center. And from that still center, you find your center of gravity. And it puts you in a place where you're empowered. You can go out there, be yourself, walk your talk, spread your wings, and fly. But if someone were to ask you, what was responsible for that change of mood? What took you from that dark place to that place of light where you felt inspired and motivated? You would say your cigarettes. No, your breathing. So it's a similar thing with relationships. When the pressure is low, during low tide, we all know what we should do. We all know the whys and the wherefores. We understand right and can tell right from wrong. We know what is good, we know what is bad, we know what is productive, we know what is counterproductive. But when emotions are high, when the tensions mount and we feel threatened, our reflexes kick in. Our conditioned reflexes kick in because we snap into survival mode. And in survival mode, your autonomous nervous system, autonomic nervous system kicks in. So it all becomes a reflex action subconsciously, see, because we've got multiple identities. There is our awareness, which is how we engage when we look at our environment, how we taste the environment, how we take it in based on our senses. Sense of sight, sense of taste, sense of smell, sense of touch or feeling, and all of that. So this is what gives us an understanding of what it is we're dealing with, our environment. Then there is our conscious mind. We've taken all of this in. How do we use it to navigate our territory? What do we make of it? What's our focus? And from this focus, what's the meaning that we derive from that focus, from that focal point? When we derive that meaning, we then decide affirmative action. based on whether or not we feel threatened, in which case we are feeling pain and need to move away from that pain. This brings us to the pain pleasure principle. We all want to navigate away from pain and navigate or embrace pleasurable constructs or pleasurable situations and circumstances. And that's that internal navigation system. So it guides us and it prepares us for that journey. Embrace pleasure, avoid pain. And over a period, this gets written in our subconscious. So whether we meet these needs in positive or negative ways, that is written in our subconscious and it becomes an automatic response. So when we feel threatened, that kicks in because the mind is switched off and that unconscious or subconscious takes over. So those are the challenges. When rubber meets the road, we feel threatened. You see, because we're all vulnerable at some point. And what a relationship will do is it will expose these vulnerabilities. The question is, when it exposes your vulnerabilities and your shortcomings, your blind spots, do you trust yourself enough to see your partner as the one who will help you overcome this mountain, who will help you take you to this place, to a pedestal where that shortcoming will actually manifest as a strength? See, because our vulnerabilities are those things that remind us that we don't know it all, otherwise we will become too cocky. Our vulnerability is the one thing that makes us realize, no, I'm going to have to lean on you as my spouse or my partner or the person I'm in a relationship with. Or even if it's a business partner, that is still a marriage. It is still a relationship. See, because I don't have all the answers, I'm going to have to stay humble. And it's that humility that makes me lean on you as a crutch. I depend on you. And we're not talking about dependency here because in the life cycle of growth, there is there is total dependency where you can take care of yourself. Then there is independency. And from there is interdependency. So when I'm independent, 1 + 1 = 1. I can only achieve that which I can achieve based on what I can do, my abilities, my capabilities, my gifts, and my talents. Interdependency means I take my gifts, abilities, capabilities, and talents, and I join them with your gifts, capabilities, talents, and the like. And so we build synergies. See, because you're bringing something to the table that I do not have. And when these two come together, 1 + 1 ceases to become 2. It becomes 4. Traditional arithmetic loses its definition. And that is what usually is the difficulty in communication. Two people who really love each other from the get-go, but when they come to a place where they discover their differences and they misinterpret these differences for threats because they are vulnerable in the face of their differences. They don't know how to manage their differences. They come into a relationship thinking they married their, I want to choose my words carefully here. So you come into a relationship thinking that you got married to your mirror image because you were caught in this cycle of saying, oh, we are so alike. We love the same things. Before I say this, before I start making a sentence and he completes it, we are exactly the same person. And you make the mistake of thinking that that is the reason you fell in love with the other person. No, you may have these things in common, but the reason you fell in love with that other person is because they have things which you do not have and which you admire. Things that are complementary, things that will abilities and capabilities, qualities, behaviors that will complement you and complete you. Otherwise, you might as well go or jump or dive into a relationship with yourself. You wouldn't need anybody. Yes.
I'm watching live from London, Coach BK, and we decided to christen this broadcast Home Improvement 101. And Coach BK, you perhaps have heard of a scenario, a situation where people who from the outset profess to be in love find themselves talking on contentious issues, e.g., money, sex, in-laws. You would think that these are lawyers, one a defense lawyer, one and the other a prosecutor in a court. They are screaming at each other, even though they're standing right next to each other. What do you think has gone wrong?
So again, horses for courses. I like to take on this one by the horns and say and approach it from not just a values perspective, but from a mission, from a purpose perspective. As in, why are we here? We're all here for a reason. Every last one of us is a tool. And we're called upon to identify what tool we are. That tool becomes our identity. And this tool is a compendium, it's a conglomeration of our gifts, talents, abilities, and capabilities, the things that make you and I unique. When we put these things to the service of humanity, we play our part, we contribute, and in our contribution, we complete the process of creation that started a very, very, very long time ago. So life is going to throw all these different curveballs at us to ensure that we are prepared. It will test us. It's not really a test. It's not even a challenge. It is just exposing and showing us the areas where we need to grow. Areas where there are blind spots, areas where there are pitfalls, just as it shows us the areas where we are able and capable. So when you talk about contentious subjects, these are just the areas where we feel vulnerable. So anything that makes us vulnerable will bring out our iniquities, will bring out our shortcomings. I always like the example of the orange. If you squeeze an orange, I give you an orange and ask you to squeeze it. I cut it in half and ask you to squeeze your half. You expect orange juice to come out. I ask you to squeeze it even harder. What do you expect? More orange juice, maybe seeds and pulp. I ask you to squeeze with all your might. Doesn't matter how hard you squeeze, what you expect is orange juice or something that is true and germane of the orange construct. Now, if you squeeze extraordinarily hard and apple juice comes out, then you're not really dealing with an orange, are you? So these areas of contention are the areas where we discover the truth about each other, not the window dressing, not the face that we put up. The truth of who we are based on our shortcomings and our vulnerabilities and our iniquities will come out, and there's no subject, there's no topic like money to bring that out, where we start feeling shifty, jittery, and insecure on the inside. It is a sensitive conversation, and this squeezing of the orange juice, what is it akin to? It is akin to the pressures that we face in life. When we're under pressure, what are we releasing? Adrenaline and cortisol. So we move from that nice place, that place which was blissful, seventh heaven, where we secreted endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and what's the last one? The feel-good hormones. That's when we are in a good place, when we're having fun. We're living it large. Life is all good. When we're in survival mode, it's adrenaline and cortisol. We feel threatened. And again, if we're not careful, We don't see our partner in front of us. We see an adversary. And if both parties do not understand that it is a state of mind, that translates into a meaning that is given a negative connotation, subsequently becoming emotions, energy in motion, that translates and transcribes into our feelings. And these feelings generate what I just talked about, cortisol and adrenaline, which tells the body and the brain, we need to survive. We are at war. Prepare for war. So it's no different from temporary insanity. What stands in front of you at that particular point in time is the enemy. You are on fire, and anything that comes close will get burnt. So it's not about your spouse. Take your spouse out, bring somebody else, introduce the same conversation, take it to that level, that high octane level, and you will find yourself in the same state doing the exact same thing.
Coach BK, let me tell you this. You speak like a poet. And I think this conversation, a lot of people in love relationships are going to benefit enormously because of your depth of knowledge on the issue. But beyond that, the clinical approach to which, or with which you approach, or with which you handle, you dissect the problems. Let's talk about, to close, let's talk about how do people get past all those obstacles? And one thing I get from you is, hey folks in love or hoping to be in love, remember that when those contentious issues come up, the person in front of you is a partner, not an adversary. I like that line. Now let's talk about solutions. How do people get to be where initially they had wanted to be in terms of communicating to say what they mean instead of what they expect the other person to discern? How do they get there?
So, assumptions are the mother of all destructive relationships. Assumptions will breed misunderstandings. Misunderstandings will grow further assumptions. Let's start with the self-fulfilling prophecy. You walk into a room and you meet me for the first time, but you've heard about BK. And you heard somewhere that BK doesn't really like you. You did not stop to verify the context of that statement, its validity, whether it was true or just a farce, or whether it was someone putting a wedge between two people who had the potential of getting together and doing what you and I are doing today, Divine. See, because there are people out there who do not want to see the light. There are people out there who would go to and beyond to ensure that they sow seeds of discord where they can, just because they can. So you walk into this room and you see me on the other side and you go, unfortunately, you believed this person. So you look at me, and of course, I know you as well, or I recognize you. You look at me in a dubious manner. I pick your vibe, see, because ultimately we are all walking psychologists. We may not know. See, when you say, I just don't feel comfortable in his presence. He just rubs me the wrong way around, and this is someone who hasn't said anything. What do you think you are reacting or responding to? You pick up that person's vibe. Because we're all sending out electrical impulses. And if I pick up the electrical impulses that you're sending out by way of your vibes, I can interpret them and react or respond to them without knowing what it is I'm reacting or responding to. So let's come back to this whole question of the self-fulfilling prophecy. So you see me, you behave in a certain way, and all you're doing is you're not quite sure whether to engage or not. I see your reaction and I interpret it as hostility. So I react rather than respond, and you can see that I'm a little on my guard. You watch my response or my reaction and you see it or take it as validation for what you heard. This guy doesn't like me. You go on the offensive, I go on the defensive, and the best defense is attack. We've just created a problem out of nothing. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's bring it back to the question.
How do we fix it? Somebody else you speak now, BK, is in trouble or about to get into trouble with a loved one. How do they fix the problem of communication so they can get from A to Z?
First of all, create an environment that is conducive for a conversation to take place, for communication to be pitched in or to be pitched on. What do I mean by this? Sometimes we come into a conversation and really we're bringing baggage from the office. We've had a bad day, we need an outlet, and we're using our partner as a handle that will provide the outlet for our frustration. We pick that topic that's fiery, that topic that is contentious, and we make sure it's a topic we know we have full mastery and have an edge over because they did not do well in that particular area. So all we want really is an outlet for our frustrations. It's not a conversation we're looking to have. This is where we need to stop and check ourselves. Let's check intent. What is the intention of this conversation? When we've defined that intent in our minds, see, because if someone comes in and all they're looking for is an outlet for their frustrations, then you need to be having a different conversation. Talk about your day. Talk about how hard your day was. If you need a hug, ask for a hug. Don't get into a conversation that will be escalated and will eventually lead to problems that you will have to deal with. And you may not be able to deal with because they were not real problems in the first place. And of course, you will never be able to come back to eat humble pie to say, hey, look, sweetheart, I was just having a bad day and that's what this was all about. So don't put yourself in a position where you would have to say sorry if you don't absolutely have to. Because that's the kind of sorry that makes you look small, although it really makes you the bigger person. But at face value, you will feel small having to admit that you had a bad day at work and you were looking for an outlet. Of course, that could be used against you for a very, very long time. So these are kindergarten mistakes we do not want to make. Kindergarten slips we want to steer clear of and ensure that we are in the straights and narrows first with ourselves. Let us be sure we are in a place where we are at peace with ourselves and we are ready to broadcast some of that peace, visit it upon the conversation we're about to have. So that is the first thing, your intent. What are your intentions? Are they honorable or dishonorable? And so it becomes the responsibility of the other person to check your intention. And what's the best way to do this? Start by doing a reset. So somebody wants to have a conversation with you, just make sure it's not a conversation that just drops from the sky, comes from nowhere, out of the blues. No, stop. Talk about your day. Talk about nitty-gritties, a bit of everything and nothing. Get to gel. Find something to laugh about to set the stage.
So what would be point two?
Point two.
Because we're going to end this conversation shortly.
Point two. Of course, if you're going to have a conversation, you need to pick a subject. What are you talking about? And this is where it starts. So you introduce the subject. Ensure that the other person is good, is happy to talk about this particular subject. And that is where communication begins. So you take turns to speak. And by the way, just to throw this in, if you've had problems with communication in the past, you could introduce caveats. If A interrupts B, A pays a fine. It could be something nominal, £1. You get your cup or your bank and you put it right there. You don't get interrupted when you're talking. But what is point two? Point two, when your partner talks, listen. And don't listen to serve a rebuttal. Listen to understand. And how do you confirm that you've understood? Check for validity. When they speak, acknowledge what they have said. See, when you're having a sensitive conversation, it could be emotionally charged. So there are sentiments and emotions involved. Find what it is. Find the sentiment and the emotion that your partner is trying to articulate. Validate it and acknowledge it. So I understand. So this is what I believe you said. And if I understand correctly, this is how this made you feel. And that person feels validated. They feel understood. That is 60% of the solution.
If I get your point two, it's listen to understand and not listen to make a rebuttal. Point three.
Point three. You have listened to understand. Validate and acknowledge. That would be point three. Validate and acknowledge. And how do you validate and acknowledge? You repeat what you believe you understood, and you check the sentiment and the emotion that accompanies what it is you believe you heard. Like I said, it's very easy for two parties to walk past and talk past each other and fail to communicate. You're saying one thing, I'm hearing something else, based on some experience that I had somewhere on the planet, God knows where and with whom. Whereas you were saying something completely different. And so you end up triggering me where I really should not have been triggered, because you were coming from a place of peace and I was coming from a place of insecurity. So that would be point three. Validate or acknowledge, validate. Point four. Ensure that you come out of that conversation. See, because this will be a repeat cycle. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Check for progress. That will be point four. And finally, one or both parties take the responsibility to ensure that you come out from that conversation better than you both got into the conversation. And if understanding what the bone of contention is all that you get or you got from the conversation, then it was a very successful conversation. Because understanding each other will do one thing. It will dissolve all the trapped energy, the bad blood between the two of you, and it will bring you two to a place where you can trust each other. And with trust, there will be little room for further misunderstanding, because you will understand that it is safe to be vulnerable in the other person's presence. And that is what makes a sustainable relationship. It's not the challenges that you face, it's your readiness to meet those challenges squarely and fairly, and to visit upon them solutions that turn the challenges into stepping stones and takes you to where you want to be and need to be.
Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray!
Coach BK, after you have long left, people will remember you for this incisive, instructive conversation. Thank you, sir, for coming on Voices of Africa on a show we christened Home Improvement 101 to share so generously what you know. And you know so much of it about communicating for the right results. Thank you, Coach BK.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And there is nothing we wouldn't do to serve a purpose that is bigger than itself, and hopefully to make the world a better place. Thanks again.
Ladies and gentlemen, and it's on that note that we end the conversation with Coach BK connecting somewhere at the feet of Big Ben in England. Thank you so much for watching. You can go ahead and share this broadcast. We air our shows through our brand new broadcast website, www.chatnightafrica.net. You can also get this show and other shows in future through our YouTube channel called Chat Night Africa. You can also find our shows on our Facebook broadcast page, on which we have thousands of followers across Africa. The broadcast page is called Chat Night Africa. I'm your host for this conversation, Divine Chamukong, in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Once again, thank you all for watching.